Hi, I'm James McGuire, and today we're talking about the concept of low-code, which is a very buzzy, fashionable term here in the year 2020. To explore that, I'm joined by three industry thought leaders. With me is Miles Sewer, Head of Global Enterprise Marketing at Dell Boomi. Miles, you made it to Friday. Congratulations.
Thank you.
Sometimes it's easier than others.
Yes.
Also with me is Dion Hinchcliffe, Principal Analyst at Constellation Research. Hello to you, Dion.
Great to be here.
And that, I'm assuming that virtual background, you're in a mansion today. That might be really your mansion, Dion, or it might be virtual background.
It's just the basement and somewhere in Virginia.
Gotcha.
The wine cellar.
You have burst my bubble. Okay.
Yeah.
Also with us is Isaac Sackalick, President of Star CIO. Hello to you, Isaac.
Hi, great to be here.
So we've got some great questions. I want to thank everyone who is viewing and listening. Totally appreciate you showing up. Also want to let you know that we do welcome your questions. You can ask your questions at any time. There's a Q&A button down at the bottom of the screen. You know where it is because we've been staring at Zoom all year long. You can ask your question whenever you want to. You don't need to wait to the end, and we'll try to get to it as best we can. So, all right, the idea of low code. I mean, it's amazing that everywhere I look, I see a headline about low code. Low code is very, very big this year. So the question is, why is it so big? And if you answer that question, could you define the term quickly? And as you answer why it's so big, Diane, why is everyone talking about low code this year? And briefly, what is low code?
Well, let's take on the low code. It's
Right.
the ability to create a software solution with little or no programming, right? There's even no code, right? And you can drag and drop solutions and create some basic functionality, but increasingly you can wire together systems, integrate them, create sophisticated solutions for thousands of users, and do it by your lonesome without knowing anything about programming, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so those are some of the reasons it's become a big deal. You can connect it to meaningful sources of data, your other applications. You can create giant multi-user applications and roll them out yourself. They're not the rogue Excel spreadsheet that periodically fails and takes down the finance department.
Mm-hmm.
But the reason it's big is a number of reasons. One, there's so many good solutions on the market that we're hitting critical mass, and it's creating awareness, because this is, what's old is new again. We've had 4GLs before, right? We've had Power Builder and Visual Basic and generations of this stuff, and then it goes away for a while. But what's I think really different about the phenomenon now is there's so many vendors doing it. People are aware of it, but there's also a real need for much more digitization, especially this year. Workers moved, our customers' expectations changed. We've had to digitally transform overnight, and now there's this real hunger. Like we have to change right now, so we don't have the capacity to do it with pro code. I now see CIOs for the first time. I was giving a keynote at the Google CIO Summit,
Mm-hmm.
and CIOs afterwards all want to talk to me about low code. That's never happened to me before.
Really?
So,
Okay.
we see real interest.
It's interesting, the buzz it's getting, because on one hand, I have to admit, I'm slightly surprised in that enterprise IT is getting more and more complicated every year. It seems like, it used to be just a data center a long time ago, and now everything from microservices to multi-cloud to Kubernetes, and just a lot more elements. You think like, well, to really be involved, you really need a lot more skills, but indeed low code goes in a different direction. Miles, what is driving this buzz around low code, and why is it still getting popular even though things are way more complicated than they used to be?
Well, it's interesting because I think low code, does have application in what we did traditionally. Some of it can be things like, hey, I'm buying, let's say Workday, but I want to customize it and make it easier for my end users to use it. But I think the other thing that's really driving it is digital transformation. So suddenly IT is now not just making a great back office, just building an operational backbone. It's building, how we make money, and the variety and ways that you want to interact become enormous. And so I think all of those things together are saying I'm going to have to do a lot more work in order to succeed, and I better have different ways of doing this that can move much more quickly.
Mm-hmm. Isaac, what would you add about the new fashionability of low code in the year 2020? Why is it so big this year?
I think CIOs woke up in March and realized they had to digitize their environments, that they had to provide workflows that were being done in the office by moving paper or having discussions and meetings between people. And all of a sudden they need to put up safety applications. They need to put up, information resources for people finding, help and, getting some more automation in their service desks. And they realized, we've done so much work over the last few years moving to the cloud and using Agile and putting DevOps in, and now we can do applications in 6 months. Well, that's not going to work, right? I got to do applications now in weeks. And so, when I used to speak about low code, much like Diane's experience, there weren't that many people talking about it until this year. There was, the questions I would get is, what about vendor lock-in? What about, my applications going legacy? What about security? What about integration? And over the last 3, 4, 5 years, a lot of the platforms have really matured around integration. They've moved to the cloud and provided organizations with some choices between deploying to clouds and deploying to private environments. They've addressed the differences between low code that helps a developer's productivity and quality versus citizen development, and helping business users actually build and support applications. And they've addressed some of the governance, so that you don't end up, instead of 100 spreadsheets that are workflows, you end up with 10 applications that have life cycles to them, that are versioned, that get tested. So all these things are starting to come together. And coupled with that, CIs just don't have enough talent and skills to do all the work that's being asked for them. So they're looking for door number 2 and 3, and to say, if I don't have to build something that's strategic, but it is something important, how do I build a workflow that connects people with my RPAs, with my legacy systems, with my customers, and do it very efficiently?
Yeah, Isaac, you mentioned the idea of the citizen developer. Just want to follow up there in that, who has their hands on? Who's doing the hands-on work in terms of low code? Is it sales reps? Is it middle managers? Who's literally doing the limited coding here?
Yeah, so I've deployed a lot of low code and no code through my career as a CIO and CTO. And quite frankly, I was looking for young people, starting in marketing, actually. There were a lot of people in marketing and some in operations. They were already familiar with using SaaS tools. They were already trying to do things that were data driven, and they couldn't connect the dots. They couldn't connect one system to another, or they had a workflow that was connected between 2 different SaaS platforms, or they needed to build a database that never existed before. And so they would come to me with these problems, or I would go out to them and say, how can I help? How can IT help you? And there were people in marketing, mostly young people, who were very technical savvy, but they didn't want to work in IT. They didn't want to code Java or .NET. But if you gave them an environment and you provided them a center of excellence so that they knew what they should and shouldn't do in these environments, you helped them do some of the integrations that at the time the tools couldn't do. And they were very effective being their subject matter experts, being the business analysts, and doing what level of engineering these platforms required. And they came with different names. I was launching customer facing product built on top of Tableau 10 years ago. And that's a form of citizen, development. I was building ad systems that connected multiple parties in an ad buy 20 years ago. So this is, like Diane said, this has been around for a while. This is, the talent around technology is getting there. CIOs are warming up to it, and the environment requires us, between COVID and digital transformation, that we're able to build more applications efficiently.
And that's a big point that you just said on COVID. I think COVID's a huge pusher of this. There are several folks that I'm aware of. One is a university in Australia that didn't have any concept of remote work. And suddenly they had to get all these laptops deployed with VPNs and all of the things. And they knew they couldn't do it in regular coding. They had to build something fast in days. And so they use low code to do that. And so we're finding, in a lot of university case studies where now you've got this mix of remote and not, and you need to very quickly build it. So it's really amazing. COVID-19 has really become an impetus for low code.
Yeah, indeed, COVID has changed quite a bit this year, including accelerating, use of the cloud. It appears that low code is only going to get bigger. I mean, Gartner tells us by the year 2024, as much as 65% of applications will be built using the low code methodology. So does this mean that coders are going to be put out of business, or will the whole universe of code simply get that much bigger? Diane, what is your take on that? What's going to happen?
So it's interesting. So I surveyed some CIOs earlier this year about where they were on digital transformation. And most of them said that they were out of the starting gate, but they were still in the beginning stages, most of them, which is surprising because we've been doing this, most organizations have been doing it to some degree for almost 10 years now. And the realization is dawning that digital transformation and even digitization of our business, the regular on-the-ground automation, is becoming so pervasive. It's becoming every part of every aspect of business that a small IT department that consumes maybe 3.5 to 5% of your budget can't change everything in your organization, can't change everything in your partner ecosystem, and can't transform your customer experience. That it might need a lot more people. And so we're realizing the speed and scale of digitization and transformation inside our organizations is going nowhere near as fast as we need it to. So we're now seeing this now looking at, we have plenty of work for our pro coders. That's not the problem. They're all really busy, right? There's a shortage of software developers. We don't have enough talent there. And so how are we going to do this? We need to tap into a much larger base. And there's something like 26 times more non-coders than there are coders. And many of them are knowledge workers, right? They're either system thinkers or they're can adapt these logical tools and begin building solutions. And we need to tap into them. And I don't think, it's going to be business analysts, it's going to be power users, knowledge workers that are very comfortable using IT that will be creating a lot of these apps, and then IT will be finishing them and making them secure and making sure the data governance is there and rolling them out. IT needs a lot of help. And so we see this model is we need our top users in the business to be adapting IT to what they're doing locally. IT then puts the guardrails on it, and then we can really scale up and go.
So in essence, the professional coders are doing the heavy lifting, and the low coders are sort of finishing things out and expanding on the work of the professional coders?
I'd say it's backwards. I'd say what we want is we want the people in the business to go out there building local solutions, and then IT has the expertise on how to make applications really work, make sure that all the logic and the error paths are there, make sure it's versioned and so on, and secure, especially for externally facing low code. So IT's job is to be much more overseeing the safety and the operations of the applications being developed, I think.
Miles, what do you think? By 2024, is that bigger percentage, 65% of applications going to be built with the low code methodology?
It really depends on what it is. I think there's an element of innovation in here and experimenting, but let me pick up on something that Diane was saying. So I was with this major bank up in Canada 3-4 years ago, and they were telling me how they would go and spend time with the business stakeholders to try and figure out what they wanted in a report or something. And they would go and spend 6 months building that, and then they'd show it to the business user, and they go, no, that's not what I want. I wanted this over here. And then they'd have to rebuild it. And so there was a lot of wastage. And so I think in addition to the fact that some things may just always be low code, there may be something out of the fact that you can get business users to really conceive what they really need. And then you put a serious developer on it if it's going to be a mass application kind of thing. I think the model, and Diane was kind of poking at this, the model should be a hybrid development model. And CIOs need to help their organizations realize that this is adding to what they can do rather than taking job security away.
Well, then what, if anything, is standing in the way of the low-code juggernaut? Or does anything need to be fixed or matured for it to be even more mainstream than it is? Isaac, what do you see here?
I think this is a matter of more people becoming aware of it. Over the last 10 years for digital transformation, the message to organizations is, you got to invest in data, you got to invest in technology, in mobile and social, you got to have great customer experiences. And so what do? We could go SaaS and get mostly out of the box functionality and configure it and integrate it, But when we needed something to go truly be innovative, truly be customer facing, we had to go hire developers. And now all of a sudden, every company has to become a technology company. That's what we started telling everybody. Well, guess what? Not everybody is terribly good at it. Not everybody has the skill set to do it. And the reality is there's just some applications that we're going to go do and hire software developers to do and get strategic value and competitive value out of them. And there's other ones that I either have to build too fast or can be a little bit more mainstream, and I don't need that competitive edge. I spoke to a hospital group yesterday, and they built their contact tracing app back in
Hmm.
March, April in low code because they didn't have time to do it. The ones being provided for the government ended when the contact was essentially done with their quarantine period. And for the hospital, they needed that life cycle to go beyond that person recover, that person get any other people infected. And so they needed a completely different workflow. But they're not a software development shop, and they don't have time to go write an RFP and get a group to do that, or have programmers to go do this. So I think this is the 65% first is going to be more people, more organizations realizing there are other options than going into native cloud development and going into being able to roll up yourselves and do it yourself. I think the other side to this equation is, a lot of us moving to the cloud, there's places where, lift and shifting to the cloud works. And that's a possible path to get applications to the cloud and get the value out of it. There's other times you got to modernize those applications. And, what that really means in many cases is rebuilding them. And so when I look at companies with, hundreds of applications that are in their portfolio that they want to modernize over multiple years, they're going to have to pick and choose which ones they're going to go and use technology and build platforms out of it because it's strategic, which other ones they can use low code platforms and accelerate their modernization efforts.
Mhm. So, Diane, what if anything stands in the way of low code getting even more mainstream than it is? It seems like there's enormous demand for it. What could possibly be holding it back?
Isaac touched on part of it, which is we just don't have the digital literacy there. People aren't aware of the solution. Then it's not part of their training program. They're much more likely to reach for Excel, which is the low code, the tool of choice today. That's what most people, run off and use now when they want to create something on their own, and they do that. And so we need to build up the skills, but we also have to make sure that there is a regime in place, a program that says, look, you can create your own digital solutions here. We have a resource kit, we have some training, we have support for you, we have a process to make sure we come in behind you to make sure the application works correctly, that it's secure, that our business data is safe. And so just that whole building that program out is what most organizations are lacking. I don't actually know of any organization that has it in any kind of really organized way. So it's a maturity curve, a digital maturity curve. We're seeing everyone's kind of becoming a digital artisan, right? Digital tools in IT are becoming very malleable in a way that almost anyone can configure and shape, and low code is a part of that continuum. And so, I think it's going to be time. But we can really speed up the effort by building those skills and then creating the right infrastructure and program internally to shorten that pipeline.
Realizing, listening to three of you speak, I realize there's something that I don't actually understand about low code. So I'll be in charge of asking the dumb question. I thought it, and it's a good role for me. I thought it was mainly like building something out that already exists, as Isaac, you had mentioned, that you would build out Tableau 10 years ago. But something I think, Diane, that you said, it's people are actually doing it from scratch, and then the professionals are coming in and sort of as the guardrails. I guess I'm confused by that. So someone with very little technical skills is building it as a kernel, and then later on a professional comes in and actually finishes it. Seems like that requires a lot from that low skill person.
Well, it's all visual now, and this is what one of the holdups is, that we didn't really have good tooling to make it easy. Like there's a great a solution out there called Integramat that allows anyone to integrate tools together using drag and drop. It is extremely powerful. But it's entirely visual, and you can watch everything execute. And debug it yourself without knowing anything about coding, right? So
Gotcha.
You can read the pictures. So there are many different models for this. There's usually a Gui Builder allows you to build a graphical user interface, and then something to do some programmable logic that's connected to it. And there's every other variation of that where there's code or some simple scripting language behind it or whatever.
Okay.
And then, and this has all become part of the major toolkits. All the big vendors now have low code, like Microsoft includes Power Apps as part of Office 365. So you can take any piece of Office 365 that you want and your data and take those functions and wire them together into a new app very, very easily. And it's very popular.
Yeah,
I'm guessing
James,
that would not have happened in the Steve Ballmer era, but maybe,
No.
that was maybe not. Go, Isaac. What were you going to say?
like any app, it really depends on what you're trying to accomplish and its scale and its complexity and, elements around data security that, and governance that Diane mentioned. But, if you take, some relatively simple apps, they are essentially replacing what people were doing in spreadsheets. And so some of the tools like QuickBase, they can load a spreadsheet up. It becomes the database artifact to use. You can build forms against it. You can build reports against it. And if that's all you're going to do and it's going to be used for 20, 25 people, there's probably very little IT that's needed. Most of the companies using tools like that don't need IT to participate. Now, if you're going to do a lot of integrations, right? I have a form. I got to push data into my ERP and get two-way information back and forth from it so I can get my list of products out of it. I'm collecting customer information. I got to make sure that I'm storing it securely. I'm doing some single sign-on so that people in my enterprise can log into it. It's those kind of things that you're probably going to need some help with IT on. And there's two places you see it. You see it up front, where IT has a center of excellence and they have people skilled on the platforms and they know what to look for to assist a citizen developer in its creation. And then you also see it on the back end, right? You build an application out, its intended use starts with 20 people. Now all of a sudden COVID hits, you have 1,000 people using it. It needs to perform better. And so IT comes in and says, okay, how do we make this thing perform better? So you get it across the life cycle depending on the type of problem you're having. But if you speak to the platform the companies putting out the platforms, they're all designed to do different classes of applications and they have different skill sets that they are attracting to be able to build them. And that's probably one of the other issues that the industry is facing is like looking at 5, 6, 7 different options and understanding, what's my skill set, what's my end-to-end life cycle around this, where am I getting cost benefits around it, what types of innovation can I get out of it. This is not for the most part, these are not commoditized platforms. These are platforms that, as you look underneath the hood, some do certain types of apps better than others, certain types of integrations better than others. And so one of the first things CIOs have to do is look at and have an idea of where do I want to do some POCs and testing so I could see, does this platform work for my use cases?
So these are really good for hackathons where it's that picks up on, you do it and you figure out and somebody builds something and either it stays as an app or not. The three things we've talked about in the CIO chat about issues with low code. One is you don't want it to create a morass of tech debt. The second is you want it to be scalable. And the third is you want it to be secure. But coming back to the kinds of things that Isaac was talking about, I'll give you a personal example. I couldn't, for my first year, put in vacation, even though I went IT into ADP. It didn't consider me right and it wouldn't let me put vacation in. So I'm honest, I told them I have extra vacation days they shouldn't have given me.
Right.
But that can be an app. Why not make it an app on your cell phone that when you're taking a couple days out, you just blah, blah, blah. Even in Workday, it's not, as easy as you'd like it to be. I think this is where we're going to see a blossoming, for both human workers and for customers. And of course, Diane would add suppliers in terms of how we interface with them. Let's make it easy. And if we can get all these people to do it for free, what a cool thing.
Well, indeed. Well, on a similar note, Miles, we heard about shadow IT a few years back, and it was sort of this negative thing at first, but really it enabled people to use external resources to get a lot more things done. Is there a parallel here with low code? Is this going to bring more of the action inside the walls of the enterprise? Miles, what's your take?
I think that this is actually most CIOs that we've talked to in our group, kind of find this a good thing. It will limit shadow IT from occurring, because if I can keep them well behaved and I know kind of what they're building and doing and how it connects and that it's secure, it's better than them buying some rogue application out there that you don't know anything about and it's not protected and all of that stuff.
Mm-hmm.
So it's better to keep them in the walls than outside the walls as much as possible. But I'd love to hear what others have to say on this.
Diane, what do you say?
It totally can be a strategy to hold your users closer and say, look, we are going to help you by helping you help yourself, right? We're going to give you tools that allow you to create exactly the right solution, and we'll support you in any part of that process that you need. That offloads IT, it lowers the backlog, and instead of them buying some application that you then have to remediate and figure out how, if it's the right thing, or you have to fix it later, it does the right thing the first time, eliminating or lowering the technical debt. I'm just not, seeing that CIOs are still in their own discovery phase of all this and trying to understand what parts and pieces that they need. And the real application lifecycle management, it's not there in most of the platforms. It is in some. So you have to know you have to have a vision for this. It's not just something you hand to users and go, here, go solve your own problems. And, you have to have some trappings around it to really make sure that there's a process and that any places where they're likely to run into issues, that you can help them with it, because otherwise users will vote with their feet. They'll say, I tried it, didn't work, so I went and used my departmental credit card and got something. And shadow IT is at an all-time high right now. So this is a good strategy to bring some of that back into the fold.
Mm-hmm. Isaac, what would you add? I guess the real question here, and I'd sort of like to sort of wrap up on this and sort of really dive into this as we wrap up, is that what advice would you give to management about low code? What do they need to know that we haven't talked about yet? So maybe a best practice or something to move forward.
Well, I mean, I think there's two sides to getting low code to be successful. I think, the CIO has to have that dialogue with a wide breadth of people in their organization about what it is that they're trying to accomplish, and do it in a way that starts creating this backlog of capabilities that you're trying to invest in over a period of time, right? It's very hard to do any kind of meaningful transformation work if you're not looking at what your big picture is, what your vision is, what your long-term roadmap looks like. And SaaS is only going to get you so far, right? If you take an environment and say, we're going to go buy 100 SaaS platforms, 30 of them strategic and 70 of them to solve individual problems, well, that creates its own set of problems from a governance perspective, from a cost perspective, from an integration perspective. And so again, now the CIO is looking at and saying, well, if that's not my answer, what are my alternatives around this? And so now you start having this conversation about what's the appetite for the organization to take ownership of some of the technology that they're building. And so we know it exists and there's interest there because they're already doing it with shadow IT. They were already doing it with Excel as an example. And so now the tools are different. We've raised the bar in terms of capability. We also have to raise the bar in terms of governance. But you start out with small teams, small groups of people who have both the willingness to learn, the willingness to participate in some good business cases. And now you start piloting and saying, picking a couple platforms out and seeing how well they work for your use cases. That's, pretty much the standard best practice to start looking at low code options.
Mm-hmm. Miles, what advice would you give to management if they want to move forward and get the most from low code? What piece of advice would you give them? And my one little minor point, I keep waiting to hear the word democratize for some reason when it comes to low code. It's like, so 5,000 bonus points to any panelist that can use the word democratize when it comes to low code. But back to my real question, what advice would you give to IT management, like how to move forward with low code?
This is a moment for CIOs to be leaders. This is a moment for culture. If we want to democratize, development.
That's good for a free game, by the way. Thank you.
Yeah. But no, seriously, I mean, McChrystal and then Open Group kind of picked up on this notion of team of teams. I think what's needed is not just that you give people low-code tooling and hope that it's going to get rid of shadow IT. This is really about driving the transformation of the company forward. And so the smart CIOs are enabling teams of teams, and then they're doing one other thing. They're creating charters. They're saying, okay, you can build this, but here are some constraints. It needs to be secure. You need to talk to the enterprise architect if you're doing something like this or that. And then allowing them to go off and innovate the company with a charter. Here, go make this part of what we do easier or better. And I think the CIOs who put it all together are going to create organizations that can disrupt and transform.
Diane, why don't you close us out today by saying what advice would you give to CIOs or CEOs that want to move forward with low code?
Well, there's a famous saying in the IT business, it's people, process, and technology, right? So it's not about just getting the low code technology and acquiring that. And all organizations have it, quite frankly. They have it in the existing platforms that they've already secured, whether that's Microsoft or Google or Amazon or whatever. It's really a capability. It's an enablement. It says we can make a lot more out of IT than we are today. We can make much more use of our data, much more use of our assets and our innovation. But we don't have a vehicle to extract that, right? Low code is that vehicle that says you can take people with great ideas or people with major pain points who wouldn't be able to create things by themselves and get them a lot farther down that road a lot quicker. And so it build the capability, right, for rapid application delivery, whatever you want to call it, right? Create that center of excellence that Isaac was talking about that says, we're going to make sure that we have all the pieces in place, all the right people, the right processes, the right tools, and it's probably not one low code solution, right? And there's going to be RPA in there and a bunch of other things too. I mean, there really is this rapid IT enablement, whatever you want to call it. That's, you're going to use these technologies and you're going to create that capability and you're going to be able to digitally transform much faster and digitize and stop falling behind. Most organizations are falling behind the digital maturity curve. They're not climbing it, right? That's really worrisome. And low code is a way of starting to crack that nut.
All right, great. Well, I think we covered a lot of good ground today. We did get to use the word democratize, which makes me really happy. Thank you everyone for watching and viewing. And Dion, Isaac, and Miles, thank you very much for sharing your expertise. I definitely learned something. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Absolutely.
Take
Happy
care.
holidays.
I'll send you the link. We can all tweet it.
Okay.
All right.
Thank you. Take
See
care.
you later.
Bye-bye.